Welcome to the deep dive. A lot of you have mentioned this really frustrating feeling, like being completely stuck, unable to start something, even when you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're going to take you on a bit of a journey to understand that feeling, often called ADHD paralysis.
Right.
We'll be using insights from places like ADDA, plus Pneumo, Medical News Today, Very Well Mind, and ADDitude.
Yeah, good sources.
Our goal really is to give you a clearer picture of what's going on and maybe more importantly, some, practical tools, things you can actually use to help break free from it.
Exactly. We've pulled together quite a bit of information that helps us understand this whole phenomenon. We'll look at what it actually feels like to be in that state, how it's different from just, putting things off.
Right, procrastination.
Yeah, procrastination,
Mm.
and the different ways it shows up. We'll also look at what might be happening in the brain, psychologically too, that sort of feeds into it, and how it connects to other things like managing tasks or even getting super focused on maybe the wrong thing sometimes.
Hyperfixation.
Exactly. But the main thing is we want to boil this all down into actionable strategies, things that you, the learner, can hopefully use to navigate this and maybe have a few of those aha moments.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start right there. The core question. What is ADHD paralysis really? We hear the term, but what is it?
Well, based on what we've seen across the sources, ADHD paralysis, sometimes people call it ADHD shutdown.
Sure.
It basically happens when someone with ADHD just gets overwhelmed, totally overloaded.
Overwhelmed by what, though?
It could be too much information hitting them at once, really intense emotions, or even just like the environment being too stimulating.
Right.
And the result is this kind of mental freeze. It just becomes really hard to think clearly or, do anything effectively.
So it's a symptom, not like a separate diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly. Crucial point. It's a very real and significant symptom of ADHD, not its own condition. The key idea is when the brain hits capacity, it can just stop, shut down.
Okay. And how does that actually look day to day? What are the signs someone might be experiencing this?
The signs can vary quite a bit, but there are definitely some common patterns that pop up in the research.
Like what?
A lot of overthinking, getting stuck in your head, analyzing everything.
Yeah.
A real struggle to actually start things, even tasks that are, high priority.
Even the important stuff.
Yeah. Difficulty prioritizing, managing tasks effectively, focus issues, obviously, getting easily distracted.
Okay.
Problems with time management, that whole time blindness thing where you just lose track of time passing.
Right. We'll have to get into that.
Definitely. Also, rapid mood changes sometimes. Difficulty making decisions, even small ones.
Like what to have for dinner?
Exactly, or bigger things, of course. And just generally avoiding tasks that need sustained mental effort.
Wow. Okay. It sounds incredibly frustrating. And you mentioned earlier, one of the articles really stressed this isn't just procrastination.
Yes, that's such an important distinction. I mean, everyone puts things off sometimes, right? You're tired, you're not motivated.
Sure.
But ADHD paralysis feels different. It's often described as more of an involuntary shutdown. It happens because you're overloaded.
So it's less of a choice.
Less of a conscious choice to delay, yeah. It's more like the brain gets stuck in that overwhelmed state, and it feels almost physically impossible to get moving.
Gotcha. The sources also brought up different types of this paralysis. Can you break those down?
Yeah, there seem to be three main types that keep coming up. Mental paralysis, choice paralysis, and task paralysis.
Okay, mental paralysis first.
Right. Mental paralysis is like a brain crash. It happens because of that flood of thoughts, emotions, information, maybe even sensory input like noise and lights.
So just too much coming in.
Exactly. It becomes really hard to process what's happening, organize your thoughts, which naturally makes it tough to figure out what to do or say next. The key insight, really, is that the sheer volume of stuff, internal or external, can just make the brain seize up.
Yeah, that feeling when your brain just hits a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. What about choice paralysis? I think a lot of us know that one.
Oh, yeah. Choice paralysis, or sometimes analysis paralysis, or ADHD decision paralysis. Lots of names for it.
Huh. Fitting.
Right. It happens when you're faced with just too many options, and it leads to this massive overthinking, analyzing every single possibility until you just can't choose. You're stuck.
Is it always big decisions?
Nope. It can be big life stuff, sure, but it can also be something as simple as, like, picking a movie on Netflix.
And then there?
Haven't we all? And often there's this underlying fear of making the wrong choice. The research pointed out that sometimes this delay actually leads to worse outcomes than if you just made a quicker, maybe imperfect decision.
Interesting. So the problem is the number of choices itself.
Yeah, the possibilities become the obstacle.
Okay. And the third one, task paralysis.
Task paralysis, sometimes called ADHD procrastination paralysis. This is that feeling of hesitation, maybe fear, or just a total lack of inner drive to actually start a task.
Especially complex ones.
Yes, particularly new or complex projects with lots of steps. But interestingly, it can also hit with tasks that are just boring or
Ah.
repetitive. There's no mental stimulation, so the motivation just isn't there to begin.
And what happens then? Avoidance.
Often, yeah. Avoidance behaviors kick in. You might get really absorbed in something else less important or just kind of zone out completely. The core idea with task paralysis is that how you perceive the task difficult, boring, creates this huge barrier to starting.
Okay. That gives us a good map of the what. Now let's dig into the why.
Hey.
What's going on neurologically, psychologically, that leads to this paralysis?
Right, the underlying factors. Our sources point to several things that are all kind of interconnected. Neurologically, it seems linked to the unique wiring of the ADHD brain. Some research suggests differences in electrical activity,
Meaning?
meaning it can be harder to filter out irrelevant stuff, distractions, noise. That leads more easily to feeling overwhelmed.
Ah, the filter isn't as strong.
Kind of like that, yeah. Imagine having way too many browser tabs open in your brain,
Yeah.
and the filter that's supposed to close the unnecessary ones isn't working quite as efficiently. So you get this constant flood of input that triggers the paralysis.
Makes sense.
What else? There's also a really strong link to emotional regulation or dysregulation.
Difficulty managing emotion.
Exactly. When emotions are hard to control, it can cloud your judgment, make decision-making way harder, and just generally make you more vulnerable to getting overwhelmed and shutting down.
Yeah, I can see that. If you're already feeling intense emotions, tackling something complex must feel impossible.
Right. And then there's the motivation piece.
The-
Yeah, dopamine. Research points to differences in how dopamine, that key neurotransmitter, works in the ADHD brain.
And dopamine is linked to reward and motivation.
Precisely. Think of it like the brain's get-up-and-go fuel. In ADHD, that fuel system might be less available, especially for tasks that aren't immediately interesting or rewarding.
So it's harder to start the boring but necessary stuff.
Exactly. Which
Yeah.
contributes hugely to that task paralysis we talked about.
Okay. The term executive dysfunction also comes up a lot in relation to ADHD. How does that fit in with paralysis?
Good question. Executive dysfunction is sort of a broader umbrella term. It describes a whole range of difficulties in managing thoughts, emotions, actions.
Like planning, organizing.
Planning, organizing, time management, emotional control, starting tasks, focusing, all that stuff.
So how is it different from paralysis?
Well, they definitely overlap in symptoms, like trouble starting things or focusing. But executive dysfunction is more the underlying difficulty with those core management skills. ADHD paralysis can often be a result of feeling overwhelmed because of those executive function deficits.
Okay, so for example, if someone struggles to plan out the steps of a big project because of executive dysfunction,
Right.
that feeling of, oh my gosh, where do I even start, could then trigger task paralysis.
You got it. That's a perfect example. The dysfunction creates the conditions where paralysis is more likely to happen.
And what about hyperfixation? That seems like the opposite intense focus. How does that lead to paralysis?
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? But hyperfixation, that really intense, sometimes hours-long focus on something super engaging or enjoyable,
Yeah.
that can actually cause paralysis for other tasks. When someone with ADHD gets totally absorbed like that, they can become almost completely blind to other responsibilities, even urgent ones.
So they just can't switch gears.
It becomes incredibly difficult to stop the hyperfocus and shift attention.
Yeah.
So essentially, they become paralyzed when it comes to those other things they should be doing. It's like the brain's stuck on one channel and can't tune into anything else.
Wow. One source, ADtude, mentioned the prefrontal cortex and working memory. How do those play in?
Right. Those are key brain areas for executive functions.
Hmm.
The prefrontal cortex is like the brain's CEO, handling planning, organizing, decision-making.
Right.
And brain imaging studies have shown some structural and functional differences in this area in people with ADHD, which can impact how well those executive processes work.
And working memory.
Working memory is like our mental scratch pad where we hold information temporarily to work with it. Deficits there, which are common in ADHD, make it much harder to plan things out, keep track of steps in a sequence, or even just hold the intention to start a task in mind long enough to act on it.
Because if you can't easily juggle all the pieces in your head.
You're much more likely to feel overwhelmed before you even begin.
And I imagine things like Fear of failure or perfectionism must pour fuel on this fire.
Oh, absolutely. That pressure to do something perfectly can be utterly paralyzing.
Yeah.
The fear of not meeting those super high standards, often unrealistically high, can stop someone from even starting, even if they genuinely want to do a good job. It's like the bar feels impossibly high, so why even try to jump?
Hmm. Tough cycle. Another thing that came up a lot was time blindness. How does that connect?
Time blindness. Yeah, that's a big one in ADHD. It's basically difficulty accurately sensing time passing.
Like not knowing how long you've been doing something.
Exactly. Or not being able to realistically estimate how long a task will take.
And how does that worsen paralysis?
Well, if you can't judge how long something will take, it's easy to feel like it's going to take forever, which
Ah,
makes starting it seem even more daunting, right?
yeah, definitely.
And that feeling of getting stuck in waiting mode, feeling like you can't start task A because you're waiting for event B, even if B is hours away.
Oh, I know that feeling.
That's often a manifestation of time blindness, and it leads straight to unproductive paralysis. Plus, consistently underestimating task times means you always feel behind and overwhelmed, which,
Yeah.
surprise, surprise, can trigger that shutdown feeling again.
Okay. Wow. So we're getting a much clearer picture now of what this paralysis is,
Mhm.
the different types, the factors behind it, brain wiring, emotions, executive functions, time issues. It's
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is. But now let's shift gears to the really important part. What can we actually do about it?
Yeah.
The sources had a lot of practical strategies. Where's a good place to start?
Okay, yeah, the strategies. The good news is, across all the sources, there were a lot of consistent, actionable techniques.
Good.
A foundational approach seems to be tackling that feeling of overwhelm directly. The daily brain dump came up quite a bit.
Pretty dope.
Yeah, basically just taking time to write down everything that's swirling around in your head, all the tasks, worries, ideas, get it all out.
Okay, then what?
Then you review the list. Cross off anything unnecessary. Prioritize what's left. Organize it somehow, maybe by category or deadline.
To put it somewhere visible.
Crucially, yes. Put the prioritized tasks into a calendar. Use reminders. Creating that external structure helps bypass some of those internal organizational challenges. So, for you listening, a key takeaway. Getting the mental load out of your head and onto paper or screen can be a really powerful first step.
That makes so much sense. Just getting it out can feel like lifting a weight.
Ah.
What about those tasks that just feel massive and impossible?
Ah, yes, the giant tasks. Breaking them down is key. Consistently recommended across the board.
Smaller steps.
Much smaller, manageable subtasks, like really small sometimes. These easy wins, even if they seem tiny, make the whole thing feel less intimidating, more achievable.
And build momentum.
Exactly. Focus on just completing these small steps, not perfection initially, and actually crossing them off a list gives you that little hit of positive reinforcement, keeps you going. The insight for big tasks is think small to conquer big.
I like that. Easy wins feels much less scary. What about managing time and attention day to day?
Simplifying things seems helpful, like dedicating specific blocks of time to just one task.
Monotasking, basically.
Pretty much. Especially useful for new or unfamiliar things where you're not sure how long they'll take. Focusing on finishing that one thing before moving on prevents feeling pulled in a million directions.
Okay.
And remember, aim for completion first, then perfection. Don't get stuck on tiny details right away. Get a basic version done, then review and refine if needed. And be realistic about what you can actually do in a certain time. Don't set yourself up for more overwhelm.
Right. Realistic expectations.
Yeah.
And what about boosting motivation when that paralysis kicks in?
Rewards. Intentionally rewarding yourself after finishing tasks, even those small subtasks, can be a big motivator.
Doesn't have to be huge rewards.
Nope. Simple pleasures, things that bring you joy or help you relax, whatever works for you. Also, physical movement.
Getting up and moving.
Yeah. Short movement breaks between tasks can rest the brain, improve focus, and regular exercise in general is known to help ADHD symptoms and attention. Sometimes shifting your physical state really can shift your mental state.
That's a great point. Just stepping away and moving can reset things.
Yeah.
What about the environment? Does that matter?
Oh, definitely. Keeping things interesting, adding a bit of novelty to your routine can fight that understimulation that sometimes feeds task paralysis.
How? Like what kind of novelty?
Could be simple stuff. Rearrange your desk, try a new pen, work in a different location if you can,
Okay.
or try body doubling. That's working on something, maybe a boring task with someone else just present. Even if they're doing their own thing, the presence provides a subtle accountability.
Interesting. Body double.
Yeah. And also, super important, make time for things you actually enjoy.
Mm.
Hobbies, interests. They relieve tension, clear your head, and bring in that novelty and engagement we need.
Makes sense. External reminders also seem crucial given the memory and time perception stuff. What tools work?
Using external reminders is absolutely key. Calendars, phone alerts, specific apps, good old-fashioned planners, sticky notes everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Whatever reduces the load on your working memory and keeps you on track. Experimenting with time management systems is also good.
Like time blocking.
Yeah, scheduling specific times for specific tasks. Or the Pomodoro technique, focused work, bursts, then short breaks. Find a system that clicks for you.
And organizing the physical space.
Big impact. A less cluttered space often means less mental clutter, less stress, better focus. Visual cues help too, clipboards, labeled folders, and just assigning a specific home for everyday items can save so much frustration.
I saw mind maps mentioned too as maybe a more creative approach.
Yes. For brainstorming or connecting ideas, mind maps can be great. Less linear than outlines, more visual. Sometimes that just flows better with how the ADHD brain works.
Right.
And related to clutter, maybe simplifying possessions overall. Fewer things means less to manage, less overwhelm, and simple visual cues like notes on the door or mirror can be surprisingly effective.
And leveraging technology, I assume.
For sure. Apps for task management, reminders, noise cancellation, setting up routines. Lots out there.
Okay. And finally, it seems really important to acknowledge when maybe we need more support than just these strategies.
Absolutely critical. All the sources stressed, getting support. That could mean connecting with the wider ADHD community, finding people who just get it.
Yeah.
ADHD coaching can offer really personalized strategies for time management, organization, prioritization. Therapists can help tackle underlying things like anxiety or that fear of failure.
Medication.
And for some, medication can definitely help improve time perception and overall executive functioning. The main message is, you don't have to struggle alone. There's help available. And be kind to yourself. Be flexible. What works today might not work tomorrow, and that's okay.
So wrapping this up, ADHD paralysis is clearly very real. It's complex. It stems from how the ADHD brain handles information, motivation, time. Understanding all the different types, the factors, seems like a really crucial first step.
Yeah, exactly. And even though it can feel incredibly isolating when you're stuck in it, hopefully what we've talked about shows there are practical things you can try, lots of them.
Yeah.
Remember, finding what works for you is a journey. It's trial and error. And self-compassion is just essential. Don't try to do everything at once. Start small, one or two things, build from there.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you listening. Knowing how executive function, time blindness, and hyperfocus all play together. How might you think about consciously designing your environment? Maybe to minimize distractions. Or maybe to strategically use engaging things to help prevent paralysis before it starts.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, maybe exploring environments or tools that strike that balance between structure and novelty could be something really valuable for you to think about.
That's a great point to ponder. And seriously, if anything we talked about today resonated with you, please revisit the strategies. Check out resources like ADDA plus SFR. Connecting with others who understand can make a huge difference. Remember, you are definitely not alone in figuring this out.